everyone. I'm Sandra, the curator program and engagement at Bow Arts. Thank you all for coming for the artist talk by Laisul and art critic Zarina, co-founder of White Pube. And first of all, please join me to congratulate Laisul on winning the East London Art Prize. Gallery in a talk by Laisul Hoque from our teacher, who is also with us today, and on exploring Bangladeshi and British Bengali experience through the lens of diasporic food cultures. And I'm so excited to see Laisul's installation and art to All the Flavours in the Nunnery Gallery. And so looking forward to hearing his conversation with Zarina today on how personal memories reshape collective identity and culture today. And I hope you enjoy the snacks from Laisul's installation, and feel free to grab some after the talk if you haven't tried it yet. And we will have some tasty tartlets and samosa provided by the teacher kitchen serving at the cafe after the talk. And feel free to use the bathroom in the cafe if needed. And we are going to take photos and video recording during the event. If you don't want to be in it, and please let me know. And I will now pass it over to Laisul and Zarina to start the talk, and hope you all enjoyed it.
See me and Zarina blabber on about random things. Thank you so much to Sandra, the Public Programs Curator, for giving such a great intro. The structure of the talk is we will talk from 7 to 8, expanding on this installation. And after that, the cafe has some small place for you and serving drinks. Thank you so much for coming. This is Zarina. Zarina needs no introduction. I will hand over the mic to Zarina.
Zarina's blushing. Yeah, thank you for coming. I'm going to quiz you now. But maybe a nice place to start might actually be with the physicality of the work, because I don't know, you might have had a chance to have a peek around and see what we can see before we started, but just in case someone hasn't, can you describe what we are looking at and what's in the room with us right
now? I've installed this work 3 times. This is the 3rd time, and this iteration in a group setting. But I wanted it to work as a thing from a fragmented memory that I've taken out and placed into this liminal space that is the gallery. And I wanted the audience or the viewer to experience the work in the space as a way they would explore this weird surreal memory. Yes, the work is facing backwards. It doesn't reveal itself when you enter the space. And I think I wanted it to be in this weird yellow glow, and then when you come across and see the work, it reveals itself holding sweets. And there's also this text that's accompanying the work, because this work is in a sense an expanded storytelling piece. And once you engage with the text, you get to understand you get a bit more context, and it provides you a bit more information to engage with the work, and you get to eat. And once you eat it, you're left with this also wanted, at least in this group setting, I know we have seen this in Whitechapel, and before this, they've also shown in Brick Lane. There was more room around it to explore, but it was always in a dark liminal space. Here, I also wanted to having it very close to the wall. I wanted it to be in a space where you're left somewhat in a comforting, cozy enclosure where you get to contemplate or enjoy the work and create some sort of a privacy. Do you want me to give you context of what the work is, or is that the next question?
Go on, you do context.
Okay, that's how I would design it. I had the structure, or how I wanted the installation to perform in the space. But a little bit of context about the work is it's inspired by my earliest emotive memory of my father sharing his favorite childhood snack with me. And the work holds my father's favorite childhood snack. The text, if you read it, it will tell you about the time when I got to experience it for the first time from my father. And it also takes you through this journey of, or at least it does, I hope it does. It helps you explore this moment, which is quite poignant in my memory, and I often reflect back on it to understand pattern of love, to understand my father, and to understand these non-verbal verbal ways we sometimes express love. And it's basically the story of my father taking me to a Bengali sweet shop and telling me that, hey, do you want to try my favorite childhood snack? I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And it is a catch to it. The catch is it's something unconventional, and you have to put in a bit more effort to try it. And these are two separate things that you have to buy separately and mix them together and try it. And they were savory and they were sweet, and then you mix them together and you try it. And once I tried it, it was blown away. My mind was blown away because of all the flavors. It works great, but it's unconventional. It doesn't, culturally, you don't mix them together. And we lived with it. We accepted it. It was our, in a sense, little secret. Not so much a secret now. But it was our little secret. Growing up, there is a dogmatic approach to culture, and there has been a very conservative view of culture in my upbringing. Growing up, I've heard a lot about how I shouldn't stray away from norms and tradition, how I should try to fit into the society, how I shouldn't challenge anything. And the person that I heard that the most from was my father, yet his favorite childhood snack was something unconventional. And that's the foible.
Can you, because this is a secret, but it's now not so secret, can you tell me a little bit about where that act of sharing the secret, that reciprocity when you're giving something to the audience as well, extending that act of love to you? Can you tell me a bit about the role that plays in the work?
The reciprocity, I like that. I think, in certain cultures, it's very, at least in South Asian cultures, when we go visit relatives' house or we are a guest coming to the house, we just buy sweets and bring it to their house. When there's a festival, there's a festive period, there's a celebration, we have sweets. And I think it's in many cultures that is the case. It's an offering of sweets. I guess when I first installed this work in Brick Lane for the South Asian Heritage Month, it was very much, okay, people will come and people will eat sweets. I'm offering sweets for free. It was, and I guess I wanted it to work that way is because I guess I'm segueing, but like sticking to the point of reciprocity, it's hidden away, and like you get an experience when you're standing on the backside and you see this thing, and if you wish to engage with it, it offers you something. If you wish to engage with it a bit more, it offers you a bit more. And as our conversation will progress, I think I will get to explore how there are more levels in this work. I like working with the idea of reciprocity is because I come from a culture which is quite covert. Nothing there is overt. Everything is in the subtext. And I think it's a useful tool, at least for me, to navigate certain spaces and be political about it using that covertness. And if people wish to engage with it, I think opacity also comes into play in this. If you wish to engage with it, it will give you more. If you don't, you get a version of it. It still gives you.
Yeah, there's a protective strategy in place. Yeah, in that sense. That is, opacity. I think as well, because this work is like materialising something quite ephemeral, childhood memory, sense memory, it's quite a core foible that your dad has, this unconventional snack combo. I want to talk about working with your family in that sense and collective generational practice. How much of making this work was about working with your dad, and how much was about claiming something back for yourself?
I love the questions. This one, sorry, I might indulge you a lot in like the Laisul Hoque lore. There's this one work called The Purpose Was to Darken the Other Side. It's a video work about my mom visiting me in London, where I collaboratively make a film about our engagement of London, experience in London for the first time, recorded on a camera that my father bought on his first trip to London. And we grew up with the footages of my father, and I put on the act of my mother in that very same camera. That was, in a sense, more of a collaborative effort with my mom. It's very much me pulling out a memory from my childhood, a memory that's so present, a memory that I hold dear, to try to understand a relationship that is a bit difficult. A relationship where every time I have a conversation with my father, they go into this structure of like battling for your ego. They go into this whole conversation about my experiences, this conversation about how questioning my life choices, because nothing is more gregarious than being an art critic and a writer and an artist. And in these conversations, I understand that like it comes from a position of care. It comes from this, oh, I don't know what you're gonna do with your life. I'm worried about you. But I'm not that interested in these. I think these worries, these conversations become a barrier in me being able to bond with my father. And I think what's lacking is that belief that I am able to practice my agency in the world that I exist in. And through this install, however way you may engage it, the way I wanted to benefit from it was understand or make it demonstrate to him in some capacity that can make something real that you cannot. It sounds very vengeful, but I swear it's not. Because, again, it becomes this critique of dogmatic culture. My viewpoint of culture very much is essentially it's a manifestation of this patriarch, this god, this leader's desires that generations of people hold on to and just practice it. And it's essentially their manifestation. I guess what's happening in this work is when you come, engage with the story, you engage with the sweets, you are left with this memory that I have that is personal to me, and the smell, the taste that lingers, that accompanies this memory. And this personal, intrasubjective phenomenon becomes intersubjective. All of these people who will get to experience this work carry on that memory with them. And that essentially collectively builds a microculture. And it is essentially me demonstrating to my father that, look, the structure, the rituals, and the traditions that we hold so true can collapse and be restructured by essentially an individual. Sadly, it is in a liminal space, it is an institution, it is in a gallery, maybe it's not outside, but once we engage with it, we get to go outside and we live with that memory. And that was, I guess, the collaborative process, but it's quite difficult. Sorry for lingering on to this conversation, is because it's also an homage to him. Like, so in this conversation, it's very much, it's not where I'm trying to like own up to this person, this father figure, by showing him that, like, by taking a revenge, like in any way, like in brown South Asian culture, I think even in British Bengali communities, what is happening is either there's this divide between, like, again, this is my personal experience, is this, it's my understanding that either we live in this weird post-capital, like late capitalist society where like this parents have this fear of like us having to earn more because cost of living crisis, and on top of that, they are in a space where they are somewhat going away from the worldly needs and they're more focused on things beyond, so they engage more with religion. And the only way to like earn the respect is either earn more or be more religious than them. And that's kind of weird. But that's not so different than how I view contemporary society as well. Like, I think we are also, I think it's not religion, I think it's very much like capitalism, because we're also fascinated by space exploration, cloud, VR, internet culture. All of them are otherworldly, beyond the physical materiality of things, and cost of living crisis, so money. So essentially it's the same, but in a different generation. I think I'm digressing, but it wasn't necessarily a collaborative event with my father, but it opens up door to having more conversations with my father, and I think that's the active side that happens in my personal life, because I get to show him that I have an agency in this world that I live in, and I get to practice it, and this is how I choose to practice it.
Yeah, it's I feel like you spoke really well about the. It's interesting because you said that this is a liminal space, so it's like enacting a kind of agency in this small way, subverting this like tradition, patriarchal dogma in a liminal space. But the work does have a financial dynamic that has like social impact, like material change, financial transfer. Can you tell me a little bit about that aspect of the work?
When I showed this work for the first time, we collaborated with the Bengali sweet shop through Otijo, because Otijo is this organization that supports British Bengali artists. But I wanted the work, like people to engage with the work for free, just because the way I experienced this memory was I didn't buy the sweets, my father did, and helped me experience it. So the context of a shop wouldn't really work because there's a transactional quality to it. The second time I showed it at Whitechapel, we worked with Otijo Kitchen, and the way it works is basically there is this social enterprise called Otijo Kitchen that helps British Bengali women find financial freedom so that they can engage out of their entrenched patriarchal system in their family. And the way they do is they have this catering service, and these women come out of their houses and they engage with these catering services, they work in them, and they get paid a living wage. And essentially, financial freedom will somehow, the idea that financial freedom will somehow give them a form of autonomy, because that's agency, feminism, that's the start. The work here, having shown this work, this exhibition runs till the 13th of April, and what happens is that by showing this work, Nunnery Gallery and Bow Arts gets tied to Otijo Kitchen. Otijo Kitchen makes the food and serves it, replenishes it daily, and the more people engage with the work, the more people eat it, the more money Otijo Kitchen gets to make. So by essentially by allowing me to do an intervention in a space, I am taking agency over the funding structure and transferring it into a social mission. But it's also the institution, the gallery, aka the father figure, offering us free snacks. It's also women, British Bengali women, coming out of their house to work and find financial freedom out of the entrenched patriarchal system, and essentially make a work that helps understand pattern and love.
Thank you. It's a really good conceptual sleight of hand, like genuine money heists. I love it. On that conceptual sleight of hand, maybe like, I don't know, ZM law now. In December, when it was at Whitechapel Gallery, I reviewed it on my blog, my website, and I made a lot out of this connection. The work is related to traditions of the ready-made, I think, in my opinion. And I wrote about it in relation to this essay written by Cedric Falk in 2020 called Transactional Objects Full of Context in Voided Sites, where he talks about 4 artists' practices in relation to the ready-made, all of those traditions, as a medium, as a concept, as an idea, a hope, a thing. So I wanted to give an artist a chance to heckle me in relation to that review. What do you make of that? How do you think this work relates to or engages with the tradition of the ready-made? Because yeah, like you said, sweet shops exist, but this isn't a shop. This is something different.
I like the Cedric Falk essay. It's also like really cool that like me and Zarina, every time we found out, we have talked, critically engaged with different things, never my practice. And every time she's written about me, I'd be like, oh, okay, wow, okay. And I'm anxiously read about it and then never brought it up. And now I'm using the public programs fund to like lock ourselves for a very good conversation.
Like that's really funny.
But I like Cedric Fogg. Cedric Fogg was a superstar when I went to school. Cedric Fogg was probably in school when you went to school in RCA. And then Cedric Fogg went and became the superstar institutional curator in France, in Bordeaux. But he wrote this essay which in Moose magazine, which I really like, and it's a set called Transactional Void, Transactional Objects with a lot of context sitting in void sites, and it's a segue from his article about curating in the Age of Blackness. It's interesting, when I read about it, like when I read about Zarina's text, I was like, okay, like that's what she's referring to. Okay, I quite like the terminology. It's very much, this work is very much a transactional object with a lot of context sitting in a void site. Maybe the transactionality is very apparent in here, I would say. But in the question of ready-made, I don't know where my labor sits in here. Maybe I think I know where my labor sits. My labor sits in getting all of you to join the Laisul Hoque cult. the labor sits in transferring this intersubjective phenomenon, this personal memory, into this collective memory, so that I get to practice agency in my personal world. But the work, I didn't make the snacks, what the education did. Yes, they were commissioned to make the snacks. You can find them readily available outside in any Bengali sweet shops that are all across East London. So many people here knows more about it than I am because I'm an immigrant and they were born here. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. When I read the text, I was like, oh my god, canon. I'm being put into canon. But even outside that, I thought about it a lot, like how is it a ready-made? Is it a ready-made? In many cases, I see it as a ready-made, but like my labor, as I said earlier, I see it more in there than here. Is that a satisfying answer? Okay.
Yeah, because I think it kind of, that question of labour and transactionality, like it's a different kind of transaction. Something's being shared, swapped. Takes us back to your point about reciprocity, I think, and the way that the work gestures at like the institutional shell. The cash grab, it's just, maybe to like press down on that phrase about labour and value. I want to talk about the idea that this work uses a specific conceptual syntax in a way that makes a grab at a different kind of value, and it recalibrates something that exists outside in the world, outside the gallery, outside this liminal space, in the context of that diaspora, immigrant community existence, flipped lit, all of that. It transplants it into the gallery, and then we get to baptise it as a ready-made. I made a lot about that in the review, but I wonder, is the way you think about it, does it depart, do you care that much about the transactional object in the loaded site or the context, or are you thinking about it in a completely different way?
You also wrote this text called No More Found Object.
Yes.
Society has moved beyond the need for found objects.
I can't believe I'm being heckled about my clickbait.
And I guess be on record and be a found object hater too, but I have an aspect of working with found objects. I am, like, I also, the film, I also work with found image, and then I also rewrite over those found images. I like working with found objects. But I guess the transactional quality makes it's important to me. I think it's part of the practice. It's also like that's where I get to insert my narrative. Somebody also told me that maybe it decreases the parameters of a found object by making it transactional. But I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm doing that, like, who am I? Like, maybe I'm like decreasing the prospects or the possibility of what it could be. But essentially, like, Brian Dorothy inside the White Cube, I think all gallery institutions, art spaces are a space where it's my reading of that text, of that book, is where culture contests to deem what kind of culture is important, because these are gatekept spaces, right? And everybody has to fight, artists have to fight to be in these spaces, and once we get to be in these spaces, they become object of sight, object of question, object of interrogation. Everybody talks about that culture. So essentially, whatever object an artist puts inside a space becomes art. It becomes charged with meaning. And I guess if I don't, like that question of transactionality, if I don't add my agency into this, how do I build my practice and my narrative? So I don't see it as that's my argument to that question of, like, am I closing in the parameters or am I opening it more?
You said last week when we spoke, not to like give you spoilers, but we did have a chat about the chat before the chat. You said something interesting about how you were only really interested in ready-mades when it was about when you were able to insert something into the narrative alongside the object. And can you tell me a bit about affirmative sabotage and what that term means to you in relation to the subject?
Okay. It's a scary term to use because it only works when we don't mention it. Affirmative sabotage is a terminology coined by Guy with his feedback, who says that especially like to writers, workers, thinkers from Global South, that we exist in these dominant colonial structures and not to fight against these structures, but to utilize these structures to insert yourself in it and sabotage it from within. And I wanted to it's so weird sitting in a gallery and telling them I'm sabotaging them and taking a prize away from it. But I think it's an important tool to because the world, our understanding, our lexicon are already colonized. That's the worldview that we operate in. But it's very difficult to break down that, completely dismantle that structure, burn it, start from ground zero. We can't do that. So we can try to sabotage it from within, and I guess in the religious work, it ties down to using my agency in the art world to practice been benefiting, or like practice navigating my personal life, using my agency in the art world to take agency over funds and distribute it in ways that I think benefits a wider cause. Using my agency in the art world to offer all of you free snacks. Affirmative sabotage.
Yeah, there's a better term for it. It's a better term for what's going on here rather than like conceptual value grab, which does make it sound like you're like swiping something. But affirmative sabotage isn't.
It also means I'm like It also means I'm sabotaging something. Either ways. I think I wanted to be a nice person, and I think I wanted to like. There has to be a way where we can critique, navigate spaces while also benefiting from it, and I wanted to have that approach, and I call that reciprocity, like that understanding of that's my understanding of reciprocity. But yeah, I don't want to sabotage. Thank you.
I do. Yeah, that makes sense. We will now discuss spectral infrastructure, please. If you don't know, which I didn't know before we started this conversation, spectral infrastructure is a concept that refers to the hidden, invisible, and intangible forces that shape our reality. Spectral infrastructure. It's in the name, but those two words are pretty big. Is that a better term to apply here rather than transactionality? Do they make sense together? Are they compounding, confounding, complicating, or are they unrelated? How do they relate to this work?
Before I start talking about spectral infrastructure, I discovered spectral infrastructure from Seth, who is also in this audience. There are a lot of smart people in this audience, so palms are sweaty. I discovered it in a talk in a public program of Joshua Leon in Jason Hale, where I think David Rogoff was also present, who was part of this collective who coined this term spectral infrastructure. And it's in the name, it's spectrality, which is things that are not visible, but they are present, like ghostly presence, things structured, like presence that still has effect. And then infrastructure are structures that's beyond the skin, beneath the skin, structures that are invisible. And the reason, I guess, we're bringing this up in this conversation is also the work has layers. You see it from afar, as you're doing now, and it gives you a kind of reading. Once you come on the other side, you get a kind of reading where the sweets are being offered to you. You engage with the text, and you get another layer of meaning. Once you eat the snack, that gives you another experience. They're all tied in, but on the backside of it, the contractual agreement where Nunnery Gallery becomes a paid retainer client of White education throughout the period of the exhibition is an aspect that is not visible. The poetics of it, in the sense that these are education women are coming out of their house and they're making these snacks to financially free themselves from patriarchal system, which goes on to understanding pattern of love. The relationship between the gallery, the father offering us free snacks, and me understanding my father through this space, or trying to understand love, pattern of love through these gestures. The work gives in many ways, but you don't necessarily have to grasp that all of them. You can engage it in different levels. But I think the terminology, the lens of spectral infrastructure, helps make this visible. I hope it makes sense.
We had a noise of affirmation from the front. Good. I think, not to like gear shift, but I want to talk about sense memory, words, and maybe like the sublime. That's my hit list for the rest of this. I spend a lot of my time thinking about how writing about art is kind of like trying to capture sense memory into words where, you know, you're fighting an uphill battle. It's like, it's not looking good for you. Proust proved that like putting words to wordless senses is just a wormhole into a whole pocket dimension where one thing can kind of take you into an eternal, expansive void. And so matching up words to art is this kind of deeply futile practice, but like art exists in this wordless way. And you mentioned something about the sublime when we spoke last week, and I wonder how that relates to putting words to the wordlessness and the massive subventions.
Again, British art lore. Adam Fura is this artist who has this video work called Strollcast, where he walks around Brent with this artist called Abbas Adibi. In this work, at some point while they're walking around, Abbas Adibi points at this phone shop, you know, the ones that has these like mobile banners, and points at the window display and goes like, look, there's a PS5, there's a vlogging rig, there is a gimbal stabilizer, there's a light ring, there's a vape. This is a weird, there's a toy car, there's fake Gucci wallet, this is a weird display, this is of random things. But it's not weird, it's carefully curated. It might not seem to you, but it's carefully curated. These are the manifestation of desires of men, hegemonic masculinity. It's all that this current generation of men desire, and they're in this window display. As they're walking past, they talk about, look, there's an Afghan salesman selling mangoes, there's a Persian rock store, there's an Iranian kebab shop, and then there is Sainsbury. You have to look both ways when you cross the street. There's so much happening around you. And that's the experience of living in an urban environment. You go to South Asia, you go to any other cities, they're way more chaotic. And while we're operating in these spaces, we're constantly processing everything. And it requires us to be in a state of hypervigilance, this state of constantly observing the structure, the labor, the supply chain, all of it, of our environment. It's very difficult to think about it constantly, but we're doing it. Like momentarily, we're observing it and we're operating the space. And once it hits you, all of that, I guess that's a form of sublime. It's very hard to talk about sublime without profanity for me. So, fair warning. For me, sublime works when it's like I'm standing in front of a space. The reason I'm talking about sublime is it's quite important to me. It's quite important in every artist practice to explore sublime. But I experience sublime as oh my fucking god, or holy fucking shit. And they're usually very quiet. They feel like a soft punch in the heart, or like somebody's pushing up your diaphragm, and they happen personally in my personal space. Sometimes also when you're in a roller coaster and you're going through a whole range of emotion, your heart is flying out of your body, knowing that you won't die. And I think, what's the question about sublime?
I guess just how does it relate to the wider network of this work? That's the question I'm getting at, like you say.
Yeah, it's quite tricky because it's then I'm trying to defend the sublime aspect of my own work, and I really don't want to.
Do you want me to?
Yes.
I will, I know the answer. I think you've done this very I want to say remarkable, and you can't actually call someone remarkable to their face. You know what I mean? That's kind of like but I think it is the conceptual sleight of hand where you're like the literal like cash transfer, but then also like the introspective to the introspective, where you're like translating this like deeply personal, like childhood sense memory, personal foible, microculture. All of you will eat that, and it will have like material impact on like a literal scale, like person to person on the street scale. You making like a grab at agency. I think there is something in the way scale is being blown out in all of those moments. I read something like bizarre a couple of years ago by a writer called Daisy Hildyard, and she wrote an essay called Sweatshop Sublime, and it describes the like horror and awe that you get when you're looking at an industrial wasteland from the window of a plane, or like contemplating supply chains, or like, you know, all of our clothes were made somewhere else. Like just thinking about that makes us feel woozy. Like it's that kind of sublime, whereas like the scale of that is like incomprehensible. And like it's impossible to think about all those little things all at the same time. I think for me, that is where the work is sublime, and I think I would depend on that. What do you think? What do you think about that? Yeah. Well, that was my next question actually, but I'll give you the answer. Okay, I want to end on something nice, maybe poetic, small, and personal in a way. Maybe also actually this is a sweaty question. In this, yeah, to be fair, quite unwieldy conversation about reciprocity, transactionality, conceptual value, labour, sense memory, history, maybe good kind of narrative closure would be to ask, does your dad know that, like, right now there are 55 old people sat in a gallery in East London thinking about the conceptual meaning of his favourite snack? And if so, what does he think about it?
Yeah, he does. And I've shown it 3 times. This is the 3rd time I'm showing it, and every time it's funny because you know what he says? He's like, "Oh, it's great because I might migrate into London and then sell this because you've already built a target audience." And it's really funny, but it's also fascinating because our conversations have shifted a lot since I've made this work. And I don't know, maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, maybe the wider political context of what's happening in Bangladesh, in relation to the UK helped or changed. I find it utterly fascinating because my father studied engineering. He went and worked in the private sector for a bit, sat for the Bangladesh civil service, became a public servant, worked in the civil service for a good 35 years till his retirement. And throughout that period, I've seen him be nationalistic, be patriotic, give his life out for this job, this idea of nation building, to the point where at some point we grew up with so much projected plantation of an idea of immigrating aspirations, to the point where like now that's all that there is, this idea of immigrating, this aspiration for immigrating. And we grew up with that. We were trained like with that. We were trained to speak, like to critically engage in a language that is not our own, a language we didn't speak at home. Therefore, I see myself as like so much effort went into training me into communicating with the outside world, yet I never got to connect with the inside, with my personal it draws from all of that. It draws from this aspiration of going elsewhere. And why does that happen? It's quite important for me to ask, understand that aspect, like what is happening. And I think this is like a work in progress. The practice is a work, and my practice is a work in progress into like understanding that.
About your practice without that moment of introspection.
Yeah, the moment of introspection.
I think that feels like sublime, right? Like in the review of this work at Whitechapel, I kind of avoided talking about the work at first, and I spoke about this memory I have of when I was 25, I went back to Bangladesh for I think the third time, and my family's from Dhaka, and my dada left just before the war actually, a month before the war broke out, and he came to London and then he couldn't go back. We were stuck here, and that's good because now I'm talking to you all this. But I went back to make a film about my brother and the war and fishing and ghosts, and I remember driving around the countryside with my uncle, like over these new roads and these new bridges that had been built like before my brother's village had been completely disconnected, and now we would have to get there via boat, and now we could drive over this new road. But the reason why the bridge was built was because you couldn't get there by boat anymore. The river had dried up. The dam all the way upstream in India had meant that like the river flooded in the winter, dried up in the summer, and it's a kind of thinking about that, thinking about your work, and like I get that gut punch, like, and it's not like the joy of like coming down a roller coaster. It's something that will never find any resolution for me, because it's just like an immutable fact. We are here, I'm here, I speak with this accent, and I don't know, the lack of resolution. I want resolution, I want narrative closure. I don't know what to do with it.
When in the spirit of sharing stories, I think so. My father worked in like this department called Roads and Highway, where like their job was to connect remote areas of Bangladesh, like with roads, like proper functioning roads, and that's quite political in the sense that when you connect a remote area to the city with roads, by building roads, you also usher in so many different things. You usher in an aspect of settler colonialism. You usher in industrialization, you usher in globalization into this land that also infrastructure, but like you do so much. You open doors for so many things, complex, nuanced things. And these are stories I don't like. Maybe he tells these stories now is because of the kind of change in political climate in Bangladesh. For those of you who don't know, there has been a regime change. The regime has been in power for the last 17 years. It's quite difficult to be who you are and exist in this culture. Like, I understand why there is a dogmatic approach to culture. I understand why there's this case of this author called Suhas Manan, who was this editor of this queer magazine, and he was lynched and murdered. When you want to do any form of intervention intervention or challenge culture and norm, you either get lynched, you either get beheaded, you either get extradited, you either disappear. And that has been the culture that I grew up with for the last 17 years. And maybe who knows, it's quite dark. And I understand why maybe there's a generational trauma that spills over from there. But my father was also, coming back to my father, he shares these stories now because maybe he's able to, of the political change. But it's very important for me to document these uncoverings. There's this area in Bangladesh called Chittagong Hill Tracks. It's quite politically contested. It's because there's a separatist movement and armed resistance that was going on for a long period of time. My father's department, when he was a superintendent, he was stationed there, and that's when I was born. With a newlywed wife and a baby boy, he was building roads into a community, into a land that had an armed resistance force. There are various ways bureaucracy works. There are various ways. It's funny, he told me this story about there were moments when he had to keep the Bangladesh army in check. There were moments when he had to keep his supervisors in check with the understanding that, yes, they are police, but it's there were moments when he had to negotiate, be a diplomat between the government and the armed resistance force so that they could continue operating, doing their projects and finishing it while he was a superintendent. And throughout these structures, these such funny stories about how from the armed resistance group, they demanded something, and he had to find a way to funnel out project funds to give it to them. And the thing that they wanted was football jerseys for the local kids that are having a football tournament. So he had to go to Chittagong with the porters, get all of their names printed, get these jerseys, pack them up in covert packaging, bring them into town, get a bag over his head, get on a motorcycle with these, and deliver these football jerseys. And I find these stories fascinating because at the end of the day, we all try to go to space, we all try to tear the art down, find these ores, minerals. We go do so many things, and it has larger ramification, but we all do this for the desires of our loved ones. We all do things for the little sweets. We all do these little football jerseys. It was always the small things.
That is a really nice note to leave it on. That is the small personal narrative closure I think I wanted to get at. Thank you for answering my questions.
I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. What we're going to do is we have this work open till 8:39. Feel free to engage with the work. The Nunnery Cafe, which is next door, is also open. Shout out to Sophie Howard, who's the Nunnery Cafe manager, who's having it open till 9 p.m. They're serving drinks. Your ticket comes with free small plates from Earth Education. You get to enjoy that as well. Shout out to Sandra, the public programs curator, for making this happen. Shout out to Leon, gallery administrator, for helping Alex, the exhibitions manager at Nunnery Gallery in Bow